Hello, I am Meryl van der Merwe, and as you can hear by my accent, I am not an American by birth. I grew up in England and then in South Africa, and my children are all South African. We moved though to America in 2003, and for various reasons decided to start homeschooling. When we started homeschooling, one of the things I was concerned about was how my children were going to develop leadership skills. You can see how this is going to happen in a school situation. They get to be in charge of projects, they get to be in various clubs that they perhaps become president of, etc., etc. But how's this going to work as a homeschooler? I put my mind to it to actually find opportunities, and I can tell you there are many, many opportunities. And I hope today's talk, as I share with you some of the things we did and I've seen other people do, that you will come up with ideas for your own children, because leadership skills are important and you do want to develop these in your children. And it is not a problem if you're a homeschooler. In fact, there are plenty of ways to do this, and I hope that this is going to be helpful to you. Now I'm going to transition over to my slides so that you don't have to keep seeing me, but hopefully the words on the screen will help to keep you focused as I talk. So, how exactly do we go about developing leadership skills in our homeschool children? I want to start with a quote. "The most dangerous leadership myth is that leaders are born, that there is a genetic factor to leadership. That's nonsense. In fact, the opposite is true. Leaders are made rather than born." Warren Bennis. And this is where we need to start, to realize that we are trying to actually grow the leaders of the future. We're trying to do that in our own children, realizing it's not just going to happen miraculously, but we need to steer them in the right direction so that they can be leaders. To begin with, you can encourage leadership within your home. You may be confused, but there are many ways to do this. First thing is, you can put your children in charge of tasks. Now, one of the things we did was every morning we would start off with a prayer time. And the church I belong to has a lot of missionaries that we support, really a lot. And so every week we chose to pray for a different missionary family. And we tried to align this with whatever we were studying in geography. So what I did was each of my children had a week. So it was all outlined at the beginning of the semester, and they knew which weeks were theirs. And they knew who the person was that they had to contact, or sometimes there were more than one in a country and they had the choice. They had to email that person, explain who they were, ask what we could pray for about them. Then it was their turn to actually lead the devotions that week. They had to decide what passage of scripture they wanted to read. They had to share with us what the prayer requests were. Now, this might sound like it was a fairly small thing for them to do. I have 4 children, so there were literally 5 of us that they were leading as such. But it was a start, and I did this with them from when they were sort of 7 or 8. As soon as they were old enough to be able to send off an email, they got to be on the rotation. It just taught them a lot of very simple skills and started them off on what it was to be a leader, just being the leader for the devotions. So there's that. My sister, on the second point, letting them plan and execute events, I noticed how she, particularly her daughters, how she would get them involved in the Easter and Christmas celebrations. These often happened at her house. She lived down the street from me. And I know one of the tasks her daughter always used to do was to create the name tags, the labels for the place settings. And she would be given the list of who there was, and she was expected to go on, and initially I think she did them by hand, and then she did them on the computer, but she had to do them, get them folded, put in front of the correct place. She was left to actually do that. And obviously as she got older, sometimes she was also left to be in charge of some of the food as well, some of the starters or the drinks or whatever it was. And then she was the one who, as people arrived, was expected to go and ask people what they wanted to drink, etc., etc. So there are many different things in your home where you can say, right, this is your task. You are in charge. So we're not yet talking about chores. This is not a case of you need to clean the bathroom and make your bed. That's not going to develop leadership skills. We're talking about something a little bigger than that, where they are in charge. They have to make sure it's done. And typically they will have to get a sibling, or perhaps even you or their dad or other people involved in helping them execute the plan. Travel planning also gives your children leadership. When we travel, we would often say, right, you're in charge of working out where we need to stop each night. You are in charge of deciding what activities we're going to do. Now, when we're telling them that, we don't want them just to go and make up the ideas of what we're going to do and then just dictate it. We're teaching them, you need to go and ask your siblings what they would like to do. You need to go and look up and see what is reasonable, how much things cost, and taking everything into account, come back with a plan. That is teaching them leadership. So I think hopefully these examples are showing you different ways of just in your own homes, starting your kids at an early age to actually be in charge of small things in your home and getting them those the experience that they're going to need. Next, obviously, is leadership in clubs, which in schools is often a lot easier, but there are plenty of ways that homeschoolers can get that. My own children did 4-H, and from the club level all the way up into state level, there are so many leadership opportunities. They can run for a leadership position in their own club. And what I loved about 4-H, definitely all the ones in the area where I am, is that once the students became president or vice president, or they were in charge of community service, whatever it was, they were expected to do it. And this is important, also going back to in the home. As adults, we so easily, when we're seeing things aren't going quite right, want to step in and say, oh, do it like this. You need to learn to stand back. Sure, there are times when you need to give some direction and help and point out things that really aren't going to work. But you also need to let your children lead. And I love the fact that in our 4-H, the adults let the children lead. They were the ones who stood up and called the meeting to order. They were the ones that introduced the speakers. They were the ones that explained the competitions. They did it all. Whoever was in charge of the community service would explain that each week. They would be the ones that had to actually bring things to do or tell us where to go, whatever. They were sending out the emails. They literally did it all. And we also had honors clubs, again, that many of these were student run. And then obviously as they got up onto sort of state level, they could run for different positions. And they got to learn what it was to actually be in those leadership positions and how to do different things. I know Scouts and American Heritage Girls will have similar opportunities. Then there's also just belonging to academic teams. This is something I've been involved in. I coach both a quiz team and a Science Olympiad team. And here you see my youngest daughter and her partner. They were working on one of their Science Olympiad events. But 15 students make up a team. Academic teams is typically 4 or 5 will make up a team. For each of these, there is always a captain or a president. And hopefully the adults involved don't just always pick their own children, but actually select the ones who are best showing the leadership skills and then giving them the opportunity to lead. We've just finished our regional science Olympiad, and what was very heartwarming to the coaches was to see the one student in particular who was captain of his team, and we coached 4 teams, so there's a number of them. But he didn't know this, but we used Slack, and it was a channel that the students had created. But we went in and had a look and saw him the week before encouraging his team members not to give up and to keep working until the last. It was just very sweet and just done so well. And this is from a child who was very quiet and hardly said anything when he first joined us, watching him becoming more confident and starting to really take on the role of leader and being the captain of his team. So look for things like that. Now, obviously, you don't want to just do it for the leadership. All our kids involved in Science Olympiad really enjoy doing it. But it does give that as well. Same with the quiz bowl teams. You know, the quiz captain is the one that has to, whenever there are bonuses, those are the questions that you confer on, and you decide together what the answer is going to be. But the captain has to give it. That teaches them to know who to listen to and not to always just trust their own ideas. There's just a lot of skill involved, and I love watching the students grow into that role. Sports obviously gives it. You typically have a captain of a sports team. And there are so many different sports opportunities that your children can get involved in that I'm sure that you can find something. The other thing related to sports, though, is if they're particularly good, they may be able to actually help coach younger students. I've known students of mine who in ballet help teach younger ballet. I've literally just seen a friend of mine post on Facebook before I came to record this, who was talking about her son, who's in middle school, has been helping coach basketball for younger children, and he's helped ref, etc., etc., and all of this he's taken in an extremely responsible fashion. His mom was commenting on Facebook. She's amazed at how he sets his alarm early on a Saturday morning to make sure he wakes up in time so that he can go and do the duties that he has. So right now I want to say, adults, if you are in a position where you're running a team of something, and there is a place where you could use students to help you, do look around, whether they're homeschool students or not, and help other students come and be part of your team and give them responsibilities so that they can develop that leadership. And lastly, start their own. What if your child wants to do something and there isn't a club? I know my son really enjoyed strategy games, my younger of my two sons, and he was like, oh, it'll be fun to have a strategy games club. And I turned to him and said, well, why don't you start one? And he said, okay. And it was a really simple thing for him to do. He and his friend ran it together. One week they came to our house. Another week they went to the other friend's mom. They went to their house. They just took it in turns. They put out emails in our local community. They didn't just do it for homeschoolers. They invited anybody. They told their friends. And they just made sure there were games. They decided what they were going to play. But then they stepped it up a notch and they decided to run a tournament. And they charged $5 for the tournament, and all the money that they earned, they took and they bought strategy games, and then they took them and donated them to an inner city after school program. So much leadership involved there. They did it themselves. I didn't help them, didn't do anything, but they managed to do it and practice. Next thing, to kind of segue from the last one, is leadership through community service. Now, notice that there's two different types of community service. There's the kind when you just go along and somebody tells you what to do and you just do it. And obviously, it's great for your kids to do that. It's valuable to help wherever you can. But look for opportunities when they can actually be leaders. Now, if they're doing scouts, I know that they need, for the Eagle Scouts project, they do need to create something. And they will often be, building a small playground somewhere or creating a community garden. These are just things that I know some of the students that I've been aware of have done. One of them did something at the zoo. I remember there was some kind of a project. But every project like this, they can't just do it by themselves. It involves them stepping up and being leaders. They need to go and liaise with whatever place they're going to be doing the project with. They need to enlist help from other people. These are all going to teach them to be a leader. But other places, look for opportunities to teach, because teaching is leading. So here you can see my youngest daughter. She was actually only in 7th or 8th grade, I think, at the time. But we went to an inner city program, and she would run science electives for them. Right now, she's teaching them how to read fingerprints. So that's why the little magnifying glass is out, and she set up a whole little crime scene. She created the whole thing. She first taught them all the different skills, and then she got them to work through it and try and figure out who done it. She also did some things with rockets, and we had volcanoes, and she just did a whole bunch of different things. And I was really impressed to see her be organized, plan what she was going to do, obviously get me to drive her there. She was too young to drive. And when we got there, I did not help her. Well, I did. She would say to me, Mom, can you please go fill this with water? Mom, can you go clean this out? Mom, can you do this? She was very good at delegating and getting me to do what she needed me to do so that she could do the task properly of showing these children. You may have ESL opportunities. I know she also, when she was much older, helped out at an ESL camp for refugees, where she used her theatre and her acting knowledge to take the words the students had learned each week, and she would turn them into fun acting games, and she would lead those. VBS, obviously sometimes they're just helpers and are walking around with children, but if they're older, they may actually have a group themselves, and they may actually be taking a more responsible role and teaching. Seniors, they could perhaps be going to senior citizen homes where they could be teaching them computer skills or a hobby or something like that. All of these show leadership and get them involved in the community. The fourth way is leadership through entrepreneurship. Being an entrepreneur does require a lot of leadership skills, even if you're working alone, because you're never really working alone. You're always needing to get a team under you doing something, whether it's your family who are helping you or whether you're actually employing other people. This is a picture of my oldest son who did start various businesses when he was young. This was actually a competition that he'd won and ended up getting to be on a poster for something in Tennessee. He didn't really, in the competition, he did come up with a solar-powered, something to do with solar power. It's long ago now. He's long since left home. But he did start his own business of fixing people's computers for them. He also did senior photos and various other things. All my children ran businesses of some sort or other, but my younger brother has one that was perhaps even a better example of how he developed leadership skills. When we were growing up, he convinced my dad to give him part of our garden to make a vegetable garden, and he produced enough produce that it was more than we could possibly eat. Then he convinced his siblings, me being one of them, to take it to school and to sell it to the teachers. I'm still stunned that he managed to get me to do that. He also managed, lived in South Africa where we did have people who came and helped, do the gardens, etc. We had somebody who came in every day and worked in our yard, and he hired him from my dad. So he paid my dad part money so that he could use him to do the labor, because my brother was too lazy to actually do the digging, etc. himself. But I watched him manage us all and really developing leadership. And he's now the CEO of a big company, which isn't surprising. So if your children come to you and also say, what about this? This is I'd like to do this. Why don't you say to them, why don't you try? Why don't you try and start a little business? Because this will help develop their leadership skills. Now, to finish up, we're going to look briefly at, what leadership skills do we need to try and work with our children to develop? Firstly is obviously public speaking and communication. You could see in many of my examples how the children would have to be speaking or emailing and also obviously sometimes just writing and sending off a letter to actually get what they needed. 4-H is fantastic for public speaking. They have a public speaking contest, but they also have all these opportunities, as I was explaining, where children are going to stand up and speak. Look for co-op classes where public speaking is offered. Speech and debate clubs, another great thing. Mock trial. My niece did mock trial. Her homeschool team actually won the state competition and went on to compete at nationals when she was in high school. But it's really going to help them develop those excellent speaking skills. Any kind of theater program. Yes, they're learning the words and saying them by heart, but it is teaching them to stand in front of people, to speak clearly, and to communicate. And obviously, make sure your children have good writing skills, and those you can find writing classes online, at your co-op, wherever possible, or just even getting them a good curriculum. Here are a couple of other things that go into leadership. And if you think about it, there are many, many different attributes you want to develop in your children. But if you think about these things individually, you can also think how to create them. So just briefly, vision. Here you want your children to be able to think about something, to get an idea, and to see how the world could be a better place if it was implemented. And you can just do this as you're discussing what you've perhaps studied together over your dinner tables, when they might say, wow, it's really sad how many homeless people there are. And you could say, well, is there anything you think we could perhaps do about it? Let them start to think, to start to get vision for things that are on their hearts. Creativity. Leader needs to be creative, needs creative solutions, needs to be doing something different to people around them. Make sure in your homeschool your children are having plenty of opportunity for creativity. And this doesn't just have to be that they're going to do lots of art projects. I'm not arty at all. But it could be the way you ask for them, instead of just doing a paper for you, tell them to create a poster. Or you could tell them to make a Lego model that will show the main themes of a book you've read. anything like that. Just keep making sure that they are learning to be creative, because this is going to help them to be creative leaders. Obviously, responsibility, and I talked about that in the example of my friend with the son who's helping out coach and ref a team, that he has to be responsible to get up on time to be there. Make sure your children understand the concept of responsibility. When they have said they're going to be somewhere, that they go there. You just can't be a leader if you are not responsible. They need to know how to delegate. And this is tough, because delegating means you've got to work out what your skills are, what other people's skills are, and you need to know how to do it nicely, so that you can't just say, you go do that, you do that, you do that. They need to learn to say, well, can you help out here? You're good at this, you do it. So just all that is a skill. Service. This might seem like the opposite to leadership, but children need to learn to be servant leaders. They need to be doing what they ask others to follow them and do. And that is something you want to be putting your child in the position to do that. And obviously community service projects, definitely one of those areas. Integrity goes without saying. We want our children to be people that people want to follow because they trust their word and they believe them. So stressing that always to your children. Team building. Here they need to be learning to appreciate other people's skills, to see who together would be great on a team and how to bring the best out of each person. Flexibility. When things go wrong, do they know how to change, pivot, and just go with it and find a different way to go around things? So again, look for opportunities where your children are going to have to be forced into being flexible, when things don't always go perfectly and when they have to adapt. Think about ways you can give them those experiences as a homeschooler. I know that for us, Science Olympiad just is one of those things that flexibility comes up all the time, because things just don't seem to go right in that competition. And flexibility has been something that every student on the team has had to learn to develop. So just, again, think through how you can find that. Here I want to just finish up and encourage you to be a mentor to your children. Again, here, showing leadership yourself to your kids, because you're going to need to help them to learn these skills. And it's not really something you can sit down and say, now we're going to have half an hour and we're going to study leadership today. It's really got to be one of those things that you teach them as they walk along life, that you find opportunities where they can practice it, and that you teach them just in daily life. So here, the first thing is feedback. When your child is in a position of leadership, give them feedback. One of the contests that our homeschool group has run for years is the stock market game. And one child is always designated the captain, and the rest of them are part of the team. We just need a captain because somebody needs to be entering the trades. Now, the children don't often meet face to face because they're all over the show. So they will email each other and discuss what stocks they want to buy. I remember watching or realizing my child sent an email to the students on their team, and it said something like, you need to tell me which of these 5 we should buy, and you need to tell me by 12 o'clock or I'm just going to buy them. Well, by 12 o'clock, this was noon, most children were still doing their schoolwork and weren't probably even on the computer. So that was the beginning of the problem. But obviously the tone was bad. The way he went about it there was just so many things wrong. And I could sit and say to him, okay, that's not being a leader. That's not going to work. You need to give them more time. You need to explain exactly what you want. You need to say it in a nice fashion. And I could sit there and give feedback. If you are watching your child at 4-H, you can again say to them, you did really well there. Don't forget to tell them when they do well. Don't just tell them when they do it wrong. Say, you did a great job. You spoke loudly, but you didn't think to ask anybody else's opinion. Whatever. Try and give them a positive, and try and also just show what's the matter. And be honest. Don't just be one of those parents who thinks your children can do no wrong. Realize that they're going to need to be mentored and helped to be better leaders. The other thing is, if you happen to like watching any reality TV shows, they provide a great opportunity for discussion. I've just recently been watching MasterChef, not because I love cooking. I don't really know why I watch it. But if you watch MasterChef, you will know that they have team challenges. And this current season, I'm well behind. was really interesting. In the one team challenge, the team leader simply told his team exactly what they were going to make. They didn't like it, they didn't think it was right, but they all kept quiet and did it. The other one, the team leader stopped and asked everybody what they thought, asked them what they were good at making, what they thought would be good dishes, and actually went with everybody's suggestions. That team was the one that won. They were harmonious, they worked together, they all had a good time. Now, I didn't have any children watching with me, but what a great way to have sat with, if I had a child with me, to explain to them that was showing good leadership. So whether it's Survivor you watch or really anything where there's teams, you can actually take that and show them how a good leader behaves and how a poor one, and it'll be very obvious by the outcomes. Also, when you're having movie nights together, pick some inspiring movies that show leadership. There are many of them sports related. One that has stood out to me that I thought showed some of the best leadership skills is Shackleton, which is the true story of Shackleton and how he actually decides to turn back when he realizes he's not going to reach his goal. If you don't know it, it's a true story, it's history, it's lots of good things involved in it. But that's a great one to watch. Invictus, which is a sports movie set in South Africa, is another great one which shows leadership. That is all about Mandela. Books, again. When you're reading books, when you come across examples of good leadership, stop and explain that to your children, because that is the way they're going to learn as they see the examples. Obviously, as you're an example, but then as you also just point them out in real life around them. Whenever you see someone being a great leader or being a poor leader, talk about it to your children, explain it so that they can go on, model the good and not hopefully model the bad. And I hope this has been useful to you. So I want to find out by telling you where to find me. I do have a podcast, Homeschooling with Technology. You can also find me at Founder Academy, where I teach online, and I also blog. And if you have teens, you're welcome to join our Homeschooling College Bound Facebook group, Homeschooling College Bound Teens Facebook group. And we do obviously discuss leadership opportunities, those other sorts of things that do come up from time to time, and various other things too. But if there's anything that you'd like to ask me more about, feel free to reach out. You can find me at Meryl@funderfunder.com, and I'd be very happy to talk with you.